you'll see us yours truly in front of you and on the camera. The only one here at the moment because, as I say, two hosts were unable to make it. So I'm going to wing it for a while. And the reason I wanted to have a show called Democracy, how, is because democracy now, as you know, if you watch it or listen to it regularly, is really a display. Amy Goodman, who has a very strong stomach, finds all of the human failings on exhibit, and they're all over the place. You don't have to go very far to find them. And it's sad because you like to think we could find better things to do than to shoot each other, bomb each other, and otherwise try to steal each other's stuff. One moment. That's better. The camera keeps adjusting itself. I don't need an assistant here. So anyway, I'm looking at myself on the screen as opposed to the camera. Hope you don't mind. Something personal. And if you're on the radio, you can't tell, and I won't tell on myself again. So what I find fascinating about democracy now is that it's hard to find a good democracy, because in a good democracy, you don't have these absurd, obscene things like people in Somalia, like people in Gaza, like people, you name it. Any given high school and any given day could be assaulted because we just allow crazy people who love violence set a stage in our media. And it's not healthy for us. Lots of people tend to think that's a norm. And in fact, it becomes a norm. But reality, there's a lot of people out here like me who don't shoot at schools, never gave it a thought. And most of us don't. But you'd think we were all crazy. Personally, I like Jon Stewart did a great thing on 10/10/10, 10th of October in 2010. He did a big event up in DC, and the event was called the event to restore sanity and/or fear. And his whole shtick was, in the 3.5 hours I stood in the wet grass watching him, was that even though we have a lot of dissension, by and large, people want to get along. But his major point beyond that was the media. We had two networks there. NPR was forbidden to show up, and there was one Fox, and I think it was CBS, some other affiliate was there. The media was told, "Do not go. They're just going to make fun of us." And indeed, Jon Stewart has a great way of making useful fun. Humor, as you know, is a very powerful tool. Dictators hate it. Idiots hate it because it kind of redefines what they do in absurd terms, which generally people in the positions don't can't afford to be spoken back to. Take offense at the slightest thing. So that brings me to today, and today being, let's see. This is, of course, it's the 30th of January. We get one more day in January, then we move on to February. But the things I found most interesting about what we're doing is that, let's see. Here's a little piece I wrote up, and let's see if it conveys. Okay, here goes. We're called the Work FM because we work to find what's going on, what's right or wrong, and what we can do to make it better. Well, this is a new day in the USA as we have handed the reins of government over to a collection of oligarchs. This is like the dog that caught the car it was chasing. It's only familiar with taking bites of it while others work to keep it going. As a democracy, the democracy ran on trust, something most oligarchs got rich betraying. All the oligarchs can do is sell off bits or sell access to services that still work. That's not really what you call leadership when it comes to a democracy or a democratic republic, as people like to insist, which of course it is. Democracy by itself is really dangerous, and republics kind of put up some guardrails. But if a person decides to break those guardrails, you no longer have a working democratic republic. You have just a misnamed democratic republic. Really, you have an oligarchy. So the question right now is how many guardrails are going to hold and which ones will betray us. We already know in the Senate and in the House, there are many, many people who have to presumably uh, cross their fingers when they make a deal to uphold the Constitution, etc., because they're caught making votes that contradict themselves and their values. Anyway, as I say, all the oligarchs should do is sell off the car they caught or sell access to the parts that still work. But really, that is what corruption had already been doing, and why a salesman could offer to run it with this collection of oligarchs and do a better job. That's the lay of the land, and the challenge of the moment is not to take control back, but to return the government to the citizens. Getting control back to the people who had it, theoretically, would be, I guess, I mean, in theory, that's a good, but we really have to get over the idea that either party represents the citizens. If you go do your research, you can look back. I go back far enough. The first president I voted for was Nixon, and my gosh, I didn't know what he was up to. I didn't know that he had Roger Ailes, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Roger Stone in his cabinet, and was using them to do all kinds of things that they have done since. You know, Fox News, Iraq War. I mean, name some really, really dumb thing that cost billions of dollars and thousands of lives. And these guys probably had a hand in it. Anyway, but to return to my idea, giving the government back to the citizens is ideal. And both parties really need to be chastised. And I'm sure they're embarrassed, but I don't think they're really chastised, because you look at the Democrats, they're still playing around with adjusting the deck chairs. They haven't really got that they're on an iceberg and sinking or has sunk. You don't hire an oligarch to run a country when it's running well. You hire them when you want the janitor to take over and clean the place or burn it down or something. That's how I see the present management. You don't appoint people who hate the thing they're running to run those things unless you really don't want it to work. You just want to basically burn it down. I see. Well, I don't want to launch into too unpleasant terms, but anyway, it seemed that both parties learned the lesson from President Nixon. Don't lose control of the story, or the truth will escape and bite you. And they also learned a lesson from Carter, asking the American public to wear a sweater and lower the thermostat when your opponent is promising cheap energy and lots of it. These are not winning strategies. So this is deja vu. History does rhyme. And we'll have to have good songs to stay above the noise and distraction. So I wonder if anybody had any suggestions what songs they would be, because Lord knows we'll have to sing our way out of this. It's going to be too serious, and we're going to end up beating each other up instead of the other guy because we're just so upset. And that's where we find ourselves. And that's why it would be helpful to have a co-host to pick up the slack at this point. But failing that, I found some really great stuff online, particularly from Heather Cox Richardson, who does an incredible piece every day. And she basically, she fell in love with history. She was a history student. And one day she was in the section of the library where they keep all the microfiches. And she got a microfiche, I think it was from 1835, one of the big newspapers that was going on then. Did a pretty good job of reflecting the news. And she mentioned in this piece I heard from her that she was very cold because it was in the basement and you store records in a cool place. But she couldn't take her eyes away from this. Every spool she would put on from 35 through, I think she went to about 65. She saw the story of America unfolding. She saw all the promise of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution crashing into monetary considerations, social considerations. And in the process of doing all that, she decided to basically put her life into helping folks understand how we rise and how we fall. And she's the conductor on this crazy ride we're going to take next couple of years as we pretend to ourselves that we're being led by people who actually are selling off our parts. It would be fun to see. Honestly, I'd be really happy if I was proved wrong. But keep in mind, folks, we can't go by what people say. We have to look at what actually comes out of the exhaust pipe. No, we have to look at what actually changes in the world. I mean, I can promise you anything, anything, but get me to deliver it. That's a whole nother project. And we have let politicians get off with saying, I'm going to do something, and then they blame the other guy because they couldn't do it. We need to move above that level of politics, obviously. That's not how the world works. In fact, I think you could say the whole of politics now is impaled on the fact that people make promises they can't keep. And if they do keep promises, they keep them to the wrong people. Take, for example, just as a case in point, when Reagan said he was going to lower taxes, what he really meant was he was going to rearrange the tax burden so that over time, $50 billion would go from the lower 80% of the population to the upper 20% of the population. He did that by making sure that if you had a job and you got paid as a laborer, you might say either you might have been a white collar, but still is being paid for your time, you were going to be taxed at a certain rate. Whereas if you made your money from investments, in other words, you were already rich, you would be taxed at a much lower rate. There were all kinds of ways to get out of it. So the bottom line is, after 50 years of Reaganomics, voodoo economics, it was called by George Bush, and very correctly, we find that the top 1% of the population holds, I think it's as much value as lower 50%. And this is not because they perform well or because civilization is better for it or because it conquered climate change or they've done something wonderful. It's just because they played a game on us, and the game is over now, and we're all unhappy. We're hiring oligarchs to straighten out what oligarchs caused. This can't go well, folks. So be sure to do your homework, read up, study up, but remain optimistic because humans are good in a pinch. They're practically worthless when things are easy. People fall asleep. I think we've been infantilized by having such a good life. I'm 78, and when I was born in 1946, you could do no wrong. We were the only country standing. We could sell anything we could make. It was really great times. And a lot of people took that as, well, we're special, we're entitled. In fact, there's still a lot of people that think we're entitled. Was it because God gave us this country or something? No, it was because of chance. And if we didn't appreciate that chance was our friend, and we couldn't always count on chance to do the right thing by us, if we didn't realize that, they were probably caught flat-footed. And 2 or 3 generations later, see, it would be 46, 66, 86. 2 generations later, the people in the workforce didn't spend a lot of time with folks who were at the war, didn't hear about the Holocaust as much, didn't hear about the tremendous privation that was widespread around the world and including here in the USA. If they didn't experience that, it's kind of hard to say, don't go to that war. It's not a good idea. Let's bash our way through this problem. Let's just keep taking things that aren't ours. And if we get to keep them, sort of the Cheney dictum, then you have them. You're safe. But you're not safe, because if it's safe for you to steal from somebody, then it'll be safe to steal from you when you're vulnerable. And this is how you judge the quality of a civilization, not by how many trillionaires they have. That's probably a sign of a deficit, but in how they treat the most vulnerable. Because at the end of the day, we have a planet. It's kind of small. We're kind of weighing on it very heavily by our habits, and nobody wants to change. But, that's the only way out. The only way out is for us to make the place better and have a better place, or to make it worse and have a worse place. It's kind of Mad Max is an option. We don't have to go there. You look around the world, virtually any problem you can pick, it was not Mother Nature. It was people taking each other's stuff. In other words, we humans created all these things, and we have to find ways to agree with bodies and say, you can't do that, and agree with them. Take, for example, if the International Court of Justice says so-and-so is a war criminal because of these verified, provable facts, we have to say, oh, then they should not have power, and we should not keep pumping money into them because they will only use any power or money to do more damaging things. We have to say, okay, I get it. No matter how much I like them or how much my myths align with their myths, we have to say, this isn't okay. So until we can do that, until we can say, I agree, this shouldn't be happening, we're going to be stuck with history that rhymes, as indeed history does rhyme now. And it doesn't rhyme very well. And the song it plays isn't very pleasant, to use my little metaphor. But it's what we're stuck with until we can do better. There's a sliver of a chance. It's like threading a needle that we can find our better parts to interface, but it's so easy to appeal to our fear and anger that guiding the better parts together will be hard to locate. In fact, I'm reading a book now called Lincoln Reader, and it goes through the things that Lincoln went through to grow into the person that he was. And some of those things are amazingly profound. And I don't want to read the book to you, although I probably could. I'm sure it's out of copyright. Anyway, it was built on contemporaneous writing. So everybody by this time has long passed. They haven't renewed their copyrights. But I just don't want to spend all your time with that. But there are some great things in it. And I wish I had set more of them aside. Because there's, you can see his wisdom growing a piece at a time as he got into his social life. He made one speech called the Elysium speech, because Elysium, back in the day when we had fewer libraries and fewer books, people would get together and hang out to talk about how to elevate their lives. And that was it was considered unique. There were lots of those things going on because it was not easy to turn on a radio or TV show or even books were available, but they were troublesome. You had to take good care of them. You had to borrow from somebody. As I say, things weren't available. The media was a little more difficult to get to, so you weren't hung out with intelligent people. I know even Dad talked about when they hired a hand for the farm because they wanted somebody who had a strong back, but they wanted someone who could write lots of poetry, could discuss news, could maybe recite Shakespeare. They wanted people who would elevate them because you don't just want to hang out with cranky people. You want to hang out with people from whom you can improve your life. And improving your life means somebody who's taken the time to refine themselves, to develop themselves. And this is something that really stuck with me. And the same thing is true wherever you are. If you hang out with intelligent people, you might be the dumbest person in the room, but you're going to learn something. If conversely, you find the dumbest people to hang out with, then you're going to be, and you're going to stay where you are. Maybe not get any better. And it's surely a sign of a stable society that seeks growth and expansion. And anyway, so that's all I'm going to say about that. In fact, that's more than I wanted to say about that. But in view of the fact that I have nobody backing me up, I guess I'm not going to go on and on. I'm going to turn the air back to my loop, which would be playing if I weren't talking. But I'm going to go on until I get to at least a better point in time, possibly. Let's try 4:30. At 4:30, things will be better. In fact, there's a great piece here I could read. Take a little explanation. This is from the Lincoln Reader on page 214. And Lincoln had a close friend named Speed. Funny name, and where the name came from. Very close friend. And his friend actually owned a couple of slaves. And it was just a thing people did in those days. It wasn't a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal to the slaves, of course, but a pretty commonplace. And it was a norm that Lincoln grew up with. So he's writing a letter to his friend Speed. and he thought he should clear a few points up with him because he didn't agree with him on some things, and that he wasn't going to call him out in a really unpleasant way. So he said, and this is an excerpt from the letter, you say that Kansas fairly votes itself a free state. As a Christian, you will rejoice at it. All decent slaveholders talk that way, and I don't not doubt their candor, but they never vote that way. Although in a private letter or conversation, you will express your preferences that Kansas shall be free, you would vote for no man of Congress who would say the same thing publicly. And for example, there's a guy named Stringfellow who was trying to vote in Kansas so he could throw the state into a slave state. He would run up to Kansas and cause trouble. Anyway, you think Stringfellow and company ought to be hung, and yet at the next presidential election will vote for the exact type and representative of Stringfellow. The slave breeders and slave traders are a small, odious, and detested class among you, and yet in politics they dictate the course of all of you and are as completely your masters as you are the masters of your own Negroes. I'm a Whig, sort of a progressive political party in its time. I'm a Whig, but others say there are no Whigs and that I am an abolitionist. When I was at Washington, I voted for Wilmot provision, which was kind of a progressive idea at that time, as good as 40 times. I never heard of anyone attempting to unwig me for that. I do no more than oppose the extension of slavery. I am not, know nothing. That is certain. No, no, these are people who refused to say what they thought, so nobody could guess it. But really, they wanted to protect the slave owners. I'm not a know nothing. That is certain. How could I be? How can anyone who abhors the oppression of Negroes be in favor of degrading classes of white people? Our progress in degeneracy appears to me to be pretty rapid. As a nation, we began by declaring that all men are created equal. We now practically read all men are created equal except Negroes. And when the know-nothings get control, it will read all men are created equal except Negroes and foreigners and Catholics. When it comes to this, I shall prefer to emigrating to some country where they make no pretense of loving liberty. In Russia, for instance, where despotism can be taken as pure and without the base alloy of hypocrisy. So, and then he closes the letter. Yet, let me say, I am your friend forever, A. Lincoln. So people can disagree, and they can disagree pretty extensively and seriously, and yet they could remain amicable because that's how you learn and how you educate others. The obstinacy of people these days is ridiculous, and it doesn't function. The bottom line is, if you look at all the people on the political stage now, you have to say, who's effectively making the world better for my kids, for me? Because those are the ones you want to follow. The ones that gave you cheap gas and promised cheap eggs, they're going to change that story really quickly, just like the last guy who promised that did a couple of months ago. All of a sudden, no, I didn't mean that. No, I was just kind of just joking. And now we know that prices are a very poor indicator of really how well the country works. And if we don't find people who care about details like that, we'll get you stuck with less functional people for time to come. And I really don't wish that on anybody. But particularly what I'm going to have to do, and this is something not quite as odious as that, I have to put you into yes halfway through. So I'm going to move from the current conversation to the middle of the yes show, which is an incredible show because they managed to fill a whole hour. Pray you will forgive me for that. And I wish somebody had replied to some of my comments. So I didn't get a chance to really post any notices of this beyond the event itself. So, folks, you could be here making a fool of yourself on this microphone. Lord knows we need more voices, and we need to put these ideas into play because if left to our own devices, the media will tell us whatever sells their products, and they do not care what effect it has on the audience, particularly. It would be nice if that weren't the case, and in some cases it's not, but do not expect the media to sort things for you. One of the big lessons of social media is that it's not social media. You filter it to make it social, or you cannot filter it and run around like a chicken with your head cut off, like many people do these days. And it's just a shame and a waste of human intelligence. All right. Well, that's all I'm going to say about that. Now I'm going to move you back to this great show, which I really love, called yes, yes, yeah. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Okay, but I'm going to put you halfway through it. So be a little jerky initially. This is Sonali Rising. Yes, a great magazine, great website. Check it out for progressive ideas. Not conservative, not liberal, just progressive. And here we go, halfway through the show.
Of setups and gladiator fights. And then they paired this with arming incarcerated Nazi groups that eventually became the Aryan Brotherhood. And so I show that the Aryan Brotherhood wouldn't be here today and wouldn't have grown so fast